Hello, it's Katrina at the Sewing Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make a log cabin block using Honeybun strips. And the reason I've decided to do it with Honeybun strips is they are the perfect size for making this size block. So Julie has very kindly lent us her quilt, and Julie made her quilt with scraps left over from other quilts that she cut to 1.5 inches. The log cabin traditionally has a red centre, so that was the fire in the hearth of log cabins when quilting first started. So I have cut my pieces using these, and I've already cut them out ready to sew. So I've just got a list because I have to remember which way round to do it, because we start with the red centre and then we work our way out. So I'm much better if I write it on a list. All of these measure 1.5 inches. And so you start off with your red square, which is 1.5 inches square. You then sew it to your cream square, which is 1.5 inches square. And then you work outwards. So you have all of your light colours on one side and all of your dark colours on the other side. And it's how we put these blocks together that form this pattern on the quilt behind me. So I'm just going to go over to my sewing machine now with my pieces cut. And as I sew each one, I'm going to tell you what the measurements are. So to start with, you need 2 squares, 1 red, 1 cream, and then 1.5 inches square. So you'll notice today that I've got a little iron set up next to me. And the reason for that is because we're sewing such small pieces and we need to press each piece after sewing before we go back to the machine. I've done this to save myself from jumping up and down and going over to the iron. So I'm all set up, ready to go. So I'm going to join my 1.5 inch squares using a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to join those together. And then I'm going to press those, snip the thread off. So then I'm going to press those towards the red fabric. And then the next piece I'm going to pick up is my cream piece, which measures, the next 2 pieces are 2.5 by 1.5, and we put our cream one on first. And we're going to press that one. I'm now pressing that back towards the cream. So you can see here that I've got my red cream, my 2.5 by 1.5 cream, and now I'm picking up the red, and that's going to go here because that's going to form part of the dark red block coming this way. And now I start with a red piece, and my red piece measures 3.5 inches by 1.5, and that follows on around. Press that, flip it back. And then I go to the cream. So that's my cream 3.5 inches. and you just follow your block around. So you can see why I've chosen to have the iron here, because each time you sew, you then have to give it a little press. So next I've picked up my cream. Just going to snip that bit of thread, and then I'm going to add my red piece. So if I just read out the measurements to you, so everything is 1.5 inches. So we've got a 1.5 inch square, we've got 2.5 inches by 1.5, 3.5 by 1.5, 4.5 by 1.5, 5.5 by 1.5, and 6.5 by 1.5. And then our final piece is just a red piece only, and that is 1.5 by 7.5. So you can see that I'm just building up all of these strips as I go. So what I tend to do is I cut them all, and then I make myself a list so that I can follow it down in the right order. So as we finished with the red there, the next piece that we're going to pick up is our red to come down here, so you can see how that's building up. And then finally, we're going to put our last strip of red on, which is our 7.5. And that just goes on the end, and that forms our block. So you can see that's our log cabin block. And I'm now going to go over to the table and show you on the other camera how we lay those blocks out. So I'm just going to lay my blocks out in the same design as the one behind me. So you have your center piece in red, so you can see the dark colours. And if you were using a jelly roll or some other fabrics, as long as you're using your dark ones to form this pattern, you can see how this looks. So this one here, let me just move it over. Might be able to see it better on this camera. So this one here, you can see forms the same shape as one of those blocks over there. And then you would do the same again and you would join them up. But what you can also see is how the light ones then form a block as well. So these light pieces coming out also form a block. So I'm just going to recreate that one again here with our dark fabric. So you can see that we're starting to get a formation of this lighter fabric here, which is creating another block. So you just lay those out till it's whatever size you want it to be. So as I say, you could do this with a jelly roll. You could do it with any size strips. You just have to work out your measurements. So the measurements I've given you today for your longer pieces are based on using a 1.5 inch centre. So we're just going to go over to the quilt behind me, and I'm just going to talk you through what Julie's done with her quilt. So you can see on Julie's quilt that she's got some of her blocks are using a brown fabric. And as I said earlier, these were all things that she had from other quilts that she's used. So it's a great way of using up all your scraps. But the brown still forms the dark. So as long as you've got dark and light with your red centre, you're still going to get the same effect. So this is 9 of the blocks that I've just shown you, i.e. 4 of those ones that I made on the machine joined together to make 1. So you've got 3 of those going across and 3 down. She's done 1.5 inch sashing with 1.5 inch little cornerstones here, these little posts that she's done, and 1.5 inch all the way around here with a little cornerstone there. She's put a red fillet here and a 2.5 inch border here. So this quilt measures approximately 47 inches square, and then she's hand quilted it absolutely beautifully. So she's drawn circles like this here, and she's used a perle thread for her quilting, and then she's done another circle overlapping there. And I think it's absolutely stunning. What a beautiful way to use up your scraps, and a really lovely example of a log cabin quilt. So I'd just like to say thank you to Julie for lending it to us. So have a go at this, make it your own. As always, have fun, and I look forward to seeing you next time here in the sewing studio.